It's one thing to stumble during a product launch. It happens even to the biggest names. However, what Meghan Markle has just accomplished in her so-called businesswoman era takes things to another level. A so-called jam, or rather, a spread that looks suspiciously like pasta sauce. An overhyped show that collapsed within a week. And, topping it off, a Bloomberg interview meant to project CEO vibes, but instead turned into a full-on tutorial on how not to handle PR. And the funniest part, she thinks we're the issue. Not the products, not the flop, not the untruths, just the audience. Let's start with that Bloomberg interview, because that's where the cracks really began to show. The headline read, "Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, on life and business after the royal spotlight." Sounds like it should deliver sharp lessons from a seasoned entrepreneur, right? Instead, viewers got the same old dish soap childhood anecdote, a bizarre tangent about pantyhose, and a weak attempt to come across as relatable. Not a single solid piece of business insight, and that's the problem. This was supposed to be Meghan's big moment to plant her flag in the business world, but it was all fluff. No figures, no strategies, no lessons learned. When pressed on sales, she dodged specifics, threw out a vague claim about moving from a few thousand to 1,000,000 units, and acted like a pricing jam at $9 was some revolutionary idea. $9 for something you can't even find in stores, and that barely tastes like jam? That's not innovation. That's delusion with shipping added. And it only got worse. This wasn't just a product drop. She rolled out her With Love Meghan show, the Bloomberg piece, and the new products all on the very same day. Think about that. Instead of teasing, building hype, and spacing out coverage for maximum attention, she crammed everything into one sloppy PR dump. Why? Some argue it was a tactic to drown out the flood of bad reviews on her show. And honestly, that theory makes more sense than anything she actually said. The hope seemed to be, flood the headlines, blur the coverage, and maybe no one notices the jam isn't jam and the show isn't worth watching. But even with those tricks, it failed. The show tanked. Reviews were savage. Her attempt to insist, "We know our audience," came across not as confident, but downright sad. As if Nielsen ratings and Rotten Tomatoes are just jealous haters chasing clicks. Please, no one's secretly whipping up your one-pan pasta recipe while dashing off bad reviews. They're simply not watching. That's the real issue. And then there's her "I'm a real person" monologue. Instead of accepting why the public perceives her in a certain way, she blames it on a supposedly fabricated caricature created by the press. She claims it's not her being criticized, it's this invented media version. Never mind the Oprah sit-down, the Netflix series, or the false claims she was forced to apologize for in court. We're supposed to pretend none of that happened. It's like crashing a car and then blaming the mirror for showing the wreck. This contradiction never ends. On one hand, she clings to the Duchess label, the royal branding, the weight it carries in interviews and product launches. On the other hand, she wants to be viewed as the approachable mom, the everyday entrepreneur running a small brand out of Montecito. And when asked if being a duchess makes it harder to relate, she brushed it off like it was silly. But of course it does. That's just reality. The lifestyle gap is massive. Most people can't relate to chefs, stylists, publicists, and live-in staff. Most don't hop from glossy magazine spreads to controlled interviews while claiming to be authentic. Pretending that none of this matters isn't just tone deaf, it's insulting to the people struggling to pay rent, especially when her idea of relatability is recycling a 90s dish soap ad, as if it were her origin story. And then, the so-called hero product. After teasing it for over a year with cryptic photos and hints, what came out? A watery spread with confusing labels that barely qualifies as jam. Buyers at first, reporters, influencers, critics, curious to review, not loyal customers. That early burst wasn't real demand, it was media noise. Now that curiosity has worn off, sales are sliding. That's why no hard numbers exist. However, in the interview, instead of being transparent, she dodged and casually mentioned the "from thousands to 1,000,000" line. But what does that even mean? Units manufactured? Jars labeled? Instagram impressions? Unless there's a warehouse stacked with jars gathering dust, the math doesn't add up, especially since reviews openly call it mediocre. And if you're going to charge $9 for a jar that tastes like glorified ketchup, you need more than a royal title and a polished Instagram feed. Here's the kicker. Her entire public brand is built on honesty, advocacy, and integrity. Yet here she is marketing on the same social platform she once condemned. She and Harry publicly criticized Meta for pulling back on fact-checking and harming kids' mental health. They even issued formal statements. And now, she's back on Instagram selling spreads and posting brand promos. So which is it? Are platforms toxic or only bad when they don't serve your bottom line? That's the real problem. No consistency, no clear values, just whatever works in the moment. And people see through it. They're not buying the jam, but they're also not buying the act. Not because they're mean, sexist, or jealous, but because none of it feels genuine. When asked what she wants people to know about her, she paused, looked thoughtful, and offered the same old line, "I'm a real person." That's it. Not, "I've made mistakes." Not, "I'm still learning." Just the same recycled headline. But being real doesn't make you relatable, and it sure doesn't make you right. This was her shot in front of a major business audience. A chance to show growth, maturity, even humility. She could have admitted that things didn't all go to plan, that she underestimated aspects of the business world, or that she's still evolving. Any of that would have worked. Instead, we got the same victim narrative. The world just doesn't get poor Meghan. She insists it's not about her actions. It's about this false media version of her. But her record says otherwise. She isn't being misrepresented. She's being held accountable. And that's what she refuses to accept. Meghan and Harry built their brand around their truth. But whenever that truth is challenged, they double down and dismiss every critique as jealousy or cruelty. Always someone else's fault. The press, the royals, the public, society. Never themselves. Never the lies, the distortions, the people dragged through the mud. Audiences remember the Oprah special. They remember the fuzzy timelines, the hollow claims, the way family, staff, and reporters were attacked without evidence. They remember how Meghan insisted she was silenced, only to keep talking louder than ever. That gap between words and actions is glaring. And when she says, "I'm a real person," all it does is highlight how little she acknowledges the real people harmed by her words. The aides labeled racist, the relatives painted as cruel, the journalists accused of bias. She wants empathy without showing it, forgiveness without asking, kindness without offering. That's why the public disconnects. That's why the brand is failing. Not because people can't handle a successful woman, but because they're tired of the performance. At some point, you either show humility or people tune out. You either say, "Yes, I messed up," or the apology stays stuck between the lines, never spoken. Business doesn't just run on branding. It runs on trust, on authenticity, on owning your story, and more importantly, your mistakes.